and the president of LGL Ecological Research Associates Incorporated, where he has worked since 1974. His duties include corporate and program management, direction of interdisciplinary studies, participation in field data collection and analysis, and technical report writing and editing. He has authored and/or co-authored 72 peer-reviewed scientific publications. He helped create and implement the electronic logbook system adopted by the National Marine Fisheries Service for monitoring shrimp fishing effort in the Gulf of Mexico. He is presently actively involved in a study of effects of offshore oil platform removals on Gulf federally managed fishery species, stock assessments for the KEMP'S Ridley sea turtle, and other shrimp trawl bycatch issues. And a fun fact about Benny, besides his love for Hawaiian print shirts, is that he and his wife had a macaw breeding farm and research facility for 22 years. So please, welcome.
They're about like turtles. Okay, this is, the title there you see is an evaluation of the status of KEMP'S ridleys following the BP oil spill. And I might say it's an independent evaluation. In addition to myself, the primary modeler was Bill Gazy, and lots of people contributed data that go into this, and some particular data that I did not have from any other source were provided by Thane Weebles and Elizabeth Bevan at the University of Alabama, Donna Shaver, and Jeff George, who you've met. All of these data that I'll be presenting was published in the special issue on KEMP'S ridley sea turtle in Gulf of Mexico Science that just came out. They were also presented at the second International KEMP'S ridley sea turtle symposium. And speaking of that, I would like to acknowledge the people who put that symposium on, which was quite a landmark event in KEMP'S ridley biology, and that was Drs. Pam Plotkin with Sea Grant, Texas Sea Grant, and Dr. Patrick Birchfield here at the Gladys Porter Zoo, who hosted the event. I'd also like to thank Pam and many others for getting these presentations published in this special issue. Now, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, as you've heard in previous presentation, was documented to have had an effect on sea turtles and KEMP'S ridleys. And the estimates of the mortality that you just heard was something on the order of, I think we need to evacuate, of 90,000, 90 to 90,000. The numbers are fluctuating as we, am I not advancing the slides? Did you get to see that one? Okay. Am I back on track? Okay. So the estimates were about 90,000 KEMP'S ridleys that were killed during the event. And the spill also corresponded with a surge in sea turtle stranding, especially in the area of the spill. And in addition, as many have noticed already, there was about a 35% reduction in nesting observed at Rancho Nuevo. So this concern about what was going on led to, in 2010, led to the development of what we call a KEMP'S ridley stock assessment model, or KRSAM. And this was funded by the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission in 2012 and 2013. So it was funded entirely separate from any of the oil spill type of monies. The KRSAM that we developed is a population dynamic synthesis model which integrates data from a number of sources, including the number of nests and hatchlings produced annually at the primary nesting beaches. So I might also focus or make sure you understand that our model estimates pertain to that 3 index beaches, or the population at Rancho Nuevo, where about 90% or plus of the population nests. Also, the model includes shrimp effort data as an index to estimating shrimp trawl mortality. We found it kind of strange that after all these years of noting that shrimp trawl mortality was the primary source of mortality on sea turtles, no one had quantified it relative to the effort levels that occur from year to year to year. As you heard from my introduction, I do a lot of work with shrimp effort, so I thought we would incorporate that in the model. We also had KEMP'S ridley capture and tracking data, mark recapture data, stranding data, prey abundance data. We incorporated a lot of ancillary information into the development of a model. Well, I'll talk about models if I have time at the end. I want to get a pat on the back for being on time as well. Now, in our model, we assume that we knew some things well enough to say, we know these. We can use these things as fixed parameters. And I think, yep, I have them on the screen. And we assumed that all the KEMP'S ridleys matured 12 years after hatching. And as you heard, Charles used a minimum of 10 years. And there's actually a frequency distribution of when they mature. But to simplify things, we took 12 years. We assumed everybody became sexually mature at 12 years. The other thing, we're only modeling the female component of that Rancho Nuevo population. I put this in red, the nest per mature female, because I'm going to come back to that later. And I think it's a very important thing for us to be looking at. And nest per mature female is calculated or assumed by how many nests per breeder during a given year when she's nesting, how many nests she lays. And then how often does she come back to lay those nests. And so what the literature told us and seemed to be in consensus was they on average, they produce 2 to 3 nests or 2.5 nests every 2 years. So if you want nests per female per year, that's 1.25, just 2.5 divided, cut in half. So keep that in mind because that's going to be an important factor that we're going to talk about later. We also, since we're starting with all the hatchlings and we're going to model the female component, we need to know the proportion of the population that's females. And their females are produced in corrals as well as in situ. Most in corrals. And those female sex ratios that you see are 0.64 and 0.76. So it's a female biased population. We have made it so, if nothing else. It would be to some extent anyway. Now, Nathan, yes, I did use a TED multiplier. Shrimp effects are different if you have a well-maintained TED. So you cannot explain the data based on strictly on effort unless you take that modification of the effort. So I threw that in there for good measure. Now, what does the model do? And it's a bunch of equations that, we don't need to go in. What the model does for Rancho Nuevo females, it predicts the number of nests starting from hatchlings. So you get 1 year, you got this many hatchlings released, 76% of those are females. You turn them loose, they die, they live, they grow, and they come back and lay nests. And so then you take the next group and you keep adding those up until you have the number of nests and where they came from each year. It also predicts the increment of growth for individual turtle. What we're trying to do is take some information we know and use those to evaluate the credibility of the model. Not that this proves the model, but it says, is it realistic explanation or is it out to lunch? So we try to predict individual growth rates, and if we know growth rates and mortality, we can predict the length frequency of strandings that occur based on this, on these types of input information, which was the graph that Charles showed. So these are the things we're trying to predict. And we got these known things that I talked about before, or things we thought we knew. And then we take these other parameters and twist knobs and try to find the thing to make it fit best. And then we take a look at these and we say, well, that's how the population works. No, that's not what we do. They say, here's a plausible explanation of how the population might work. And that provides the basis of going out and doing research and determine if in fact it works that way. So a model is not approved. So I better hurry. So I'm going to skip the graph. Watch your eyes. That graph shows the number of nests, that's the years, the number of nests by year, shows how well the model was able to predict. And so it's going up and it drops down in 2010, but goes back up again. This graph down here, don't pay much attention to it. It just says about half of the points are overestimates or underestimates, and says the model is pretty good. It's not too bad as it goes. This is our prediction of growth. Those are individually turtles that we have for marker and capture. That's their increment of growth. And so this is our model, says on average it looks like that. So it falls sort of in the middle of those, that cloud of points. So we said that's not too bad as these things go. And then if we're using the length frequency of strandings, we sort of approximate that. So we were reasonably comfortable that the model wasn't completely out to lunch. And the model that yielded these results was obtained when we applied a special mortality event for 2010. We accounted for shrimp trawl mortality, and we accounted for a TED effect on that shrimp trawl mortality beginning in 1990. That's the model. So that raises the question. We've heard some previous estimates of how big was that event. Well, what did our model say the event was? Well, our model, if these are the mortality events in 2010 for ages 2+, in other words, all the turtles 2 years and older. We modeled the neritic population. So that's all of the turtles. So our estimate of total mortality was about 47,000, which is below the 90,000 that you heard before. So they don't agree, right? No, they do agree. Take into account that one, these are females only. So when you add males in there, according to the sex ratio, that bumps it up to 60 or 70,000. And they also include ages 1 and 2. We did not have 1s in our model. We're just modeling 2. When I go in and take the 2s, surprisingly, the estimates are pretty bang on if you take the total. It doesn't mean any of them are right, but they're in the same ballpark and pretty close for government work. And then, so I'm saying, I think the 2010 affected these nesters that should have left in November and December or whenever they left. They should have been long gone by the time of the spill. But there's one other thing going on that year and the year before. This is a complex graph, but let me walk around where I can see. I think it was that year, starting in 2009 and 2010, those were the coldest years that we had seen in a long time during that period when they might have initiated or been in the migrating mode. And that cold water temperatures, this is for the northern Gulf, but that extended down the coast as well. So my suspicion was that there was a delay in that migration associated with cold temperatures. And I say suspicion, I'll be more formal. My hypothesis was, a reasonable hypothesis was, that it may have been delayed. Is there any evidence that might be the case? Well, yes, as a matter of fact, there is. If you look at this graph, which is, look at the red line, and you'll see that 2010 is the coldest seawater temperature average for that spring, winter-spring period. And if you look at the average date of nesting based on using Julian date, if you take the days in the year and you just number 1 through 365 and you average out how many nests on each day, what you find is that those data suggest that you had cold temperatures and the latest date of average nesting that we had seen. And that's been corroborated by further studies by Elizabeth Bevan, who has found a direct correlation with the time of nesting and water temperature in the foraging grounds. So it's my hypothesis that 2010 event, the oil spill, did have an effect on nesting females and was in part plausibly responsible for the reduction in nesting. Can we prove that? Well, I don't know. You can't ever prove anything in science. You can disprove things. But we might do some studies looking at the effects of temperature. Long story short, I think there was a delay and an impact. Now, nevertheless, we had this impact. What's going to happen next? Well, our model, and we stopped this particular study in 2012, said, well, we're going to go down here. This is what it would have been without 2010. But it's coming back, and we had data right out to here, and it was on its way. So everything is okay. We had a blip, we reduced it, but it's going to go back up, and eventually it'll cross and come back on the right trajectory. Well, that didn't happen. The next year was completely outside our confidence interval. It didn't come back anywhere near expected. So we said, well, something's wrong. So we gave a presentation to the Gulf of Mexico Fisheries Management Council, and they said, well, why don't you look at alternative models that might explain that? We said we don't have funding, so they gave us funding. So, which was nice. And so we looked at 6 alternative explanations. We put our heads together, got experts together, and said, what could be causing this? And the model that came up, that one of the scenarios was, what if it's density dependent nest per female? Remember that, 2.5 divided by every, So maybe that model fit the best and made sense. And what you ended up, what that says, to make a picture of it, if I can. That's what I just said, I guess. So you remember the 1.25 that we thought we knew for sure? Well, there it is, and that's 1.25 for all population sizes until you start getting a female population over 150, 180, and then that starts going down, and that can be either fewer nests per female or an increased remigration interval. I don't want you to remember Donna's thing about increase in remigration interval. But so anyway, that is an explanation for the drop, and will also say that somewhere along here that's probably going to level out and start going up and down or flatten out. And when we put this model together with the existing data, we again now we're starting to explain the data points pretty well. So that is a plausible explanation, but not necessarily. So with these, how did I get to there? Charles, I see I was laughing at you, and I don't feel so, it's not so funny now. So if you have a remigration interval that's a couple of years, it suggests that sea turtles, they go nest, they swim back up here, and they got to put on a level of fitness before they're ready to go back down and do it again. It takes some time. And we suggest that maybe that there's been a recent change in the ability of KEMP'S Ridley to attain that body condition necessary for doing that due to a combination of reduced food supply and an increasing population size. The population, I think, is still increasing. Okay, is there any evidence for that? Well, what do they eat? And we've already heard that they eat crabs, swimming crabs from Charles. They also eat, and Donna's got some papers on this and other people too, they also became quite happy with shrimp trawl bycatch. That's why they got caught in shrimp trawls a lot. And there's evidence of them following shrimp trawls and eating the bycatch when they show, it's like a fresh food market. You don't have to chase it very hard, it's nice and fresh, just what we like. Well, what are the crab stocks done, since that's the primary, good luck here. That's the primary food, and what you see is, blue crabs in the mid-1980s were high, but man, they started going down, and by 1985 they'd reached rock bottom. And since that time, this is blue crabs in the adult western Gulf of Mexico, and since that time they have a few good years and all, but they're nowhere near what the stocks that they used to be. So there's more turtles and fewer crabs. Why are there fewer crabs? You can start naming reasons, everything from freshwater inflow, loss of marsh, shrimp trawl bycatch, shrimp trawl effort, which is cause croakers to exponentially increase. You know what croakers eat? They eat little blue crabs. We've outlawed gill nets and commercial fishing for big drum. You know what big drum eat? Crabs. So a lot of things out there are getting managed to favor the predator. We have low, for whatever reason, and I don't know what it is, but we have low blue crab stocks and a large KEMP'S Ridley stock. So that's one source of food. Charles already showed some effort data, which I will repeat here. This is, we've had 10 years of low effort, which equates to bycatch. So that source of food has also dwindled. And remember, Jaime and the guys are sitting over there are releasing how many per year? You know, twice that which was required by the criteria. Y'all doing 700 or 800,000 a year. Hatchlings are coming out year after year after year and coming into the population, which is a good thing. So when you put this together, here is, I don't want to shine this in Charles's eye like he did to me, but anyway, here we're rocking along. The Ridley population is low, starting to build. We lose blue crabs. Population is still low. It's still exponentially increasing. Shrimp trawl drops off the map. Everything is still okay. We have this perturbation here. We get back up to here. Now we start having a decline, which I think will level out and become quite variable over time. And who's that? Is that me? I don't know where I am now, so. Oh, God. I got to go all the way through these? I can't go back? Well, we believe it's reasonable to infer, I'll just close it out, that reduced prey resources with an increased population may have changed the remigration interval, and if correct, I think this implies that what we're looking at is reduced nesting, because instead of quote unquote half the population coming back every year, a third to a fourth to whatever, and that's going to vary from year. If they have a good year, one of those big crab years, you know, they may go faster, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.